stray dog dragged home a chunk of bone still covered in flesh. The owner assumed it was the remains of a pig and casually tossed it into the bushes. But the dog kept bringing it back over and over, as if it were trying to tell humans a horrifying secret. Upon closer inspection, the man's blood ran cold. It was a human arm. Police immediately sealed off the area and traced clues along a 186-mile route from Tainan to Taipei. What they didn't expect was that the real killer had never run away. He continued going to work calmly every day and sleeping peacefully every night in his company dormitory, separated by only one wall from where the victim's head had been dumped. What was even more terrifying? Before the tragedy happened, the man had once said something to his wife that no one ever imagined would become reality. "If you ever cheat on me, I'll chop you into 3 pieces." Today's story begins in a quiet village in Tainan, Taiwan, specifically Tuku Village in Rende District. Aside from a few processing factories, the area consisted mostly of vegetable farms and fruit orchards. The residents all knew one another and lived peaceful, uneventful lives. But at noon on September 11th, 2013, police tape suddenly surrounded the area as crowds of curious villagers gathered, shattering the village's usual calm. That day, a local couple named Ngo Vin Long and Huang Puju took their adopted stray dog, Map Map, out for a walk as usual. The dog ran freely between the orchards and the rice fields. When it returned to its owners, it was carrying a chunk of bone with flesh still attached in its mouth. Ngo Vin Long didn't think much of it, assuming it was from a pig or a wild mountain animal, and casually threw it into the bushes. But Map Map, thinking its owner was playing fetch, rushed back into the bushes and brought the bone out again. This time, Ngo took a closer look and realized it looked like a human arm. Terrified, he immediately called the police. After receiving the report, investigators rushed to the scene and first took a detailed statement from Ngo Vin Long. He recalled that several days earlier, he had seen something that looked like an animal carcass in his vegetable garden. But since wild animal remains are not unusual in rural areas, he hadn't thought much of it and had simply used metal tongs to toss it into the bushes. Then, the night before the discovery, he noticed a foul odor near the dog kennel behind his house. That's when he realized Map Map had dragged the same bone back again. He had no choice but to use the tongs to throw it over the fence. Forensic examiners later confirmed that the bone was indeed a human right forearm. Police immediately secured the area in hopes of finding more evidence. Sure enough, not long after, about 49 feet away in the same field, they discovered part of a left forearm, though it was incomplete. Unfortunately, the search soon hit a dead end. Despite reinforcing manpower, draining a pond near the fields, and even enlisting local funeral home staff to comb through every inch of land, no additional remains were found. At noon on September 13th, Map Map made another crucial discovery. The dog suddenly darted into a guava orchard about 656 feet from the original field, sniffing frantically through the grass before dragging out a foul-smelling white plastic bag. Nearby was a torn rice sack weighing about 6.6 pounds. Once again, Ngo Vin Long contacted the police. Officers arrived and carefully opened the layers of wrapping, discovering inside a human head, wrapped in 3 layers of plastic and tightly encased within a pillowcase. The remains had not yet fully decomposed. All of the evidence was quickly rushed to the forensic laboratory. However, the investigation hit a dead end from the very beginning. The skull was severely decomposed, making it impossible to identify facial features. The most crucial evidence, fingerprints, could not be obtained either because the fingers on the severed arm had been gnawed off. With no other options left, forensic investigators placed their hopes on DNA testing. However, at that time, the DNA database only contained records of serious criminal offenders. The test results confirmed that the skull and the severed arms belonged to the same person, but no matches were found in the database. Based on the extremely limited clues, forensic experts were able to reconstruct a basic profile of the victim. She was a woman between 20 and 45 years old, with long, wavy hair, standing approximately 5 feet 1 inch to 5 feet 3 inches tall. Her dental features were especially distinctive. The center line of her front teeth was misaligned, and her upper right canine tooth grew inward. In addition, the unusually high position of her ear piercings led police to speculate that she might have been a foreigner. Using these characteristics, police immediately asked a sketch artist to draw a composite portrait and issued a public alert. Officers were assigned to screen incoming tips from the public. Over the course of 2 weeks, they reviewed more than 80 phone calls, eventually narrowing in on one call from Kaohsiung. The caller reported that his foreign wife had gone missing several days earlier after owing a large sum of money to local organized crime. The criminal group's territory was located in Rende district. More importantly, the man said his wife's dental features perfectly matched the description released by the police. Just as investigators believed they had finally made a breakthrough, the caller provided a photo of his wife. As soon as the image was shown, everyone fell silent. The woman's buck teeth were clearly on the left side, not the right. In an instant, all hope vanished, and the case once again sank into uncertainty. Then, just as the investigation stalled, an unexpected phone call came into the police station. A man named Chu Wenguang called in, saying he worked as a chef at Chi Mei Yuan restaurant in Taipei. He reported that his Vietnamese girlfriend, A Dieu, had lost contact with him since March 23rd. After seeing the public notice, he realized that the victim's physical description almost perfectly matched A Dieu. What terrified him the most was that the pillowcase wrapped around the innermost layer of the victim's head looked exactly like the one he had once given A Dieu as a gift. Police immediately traveled to Taipei to locate Chu Wenguang and obtained photos of A Dieu. The moment they saw them, everyone was stunned. In the photo, A Dieu's bright smile clearly revealed an upper right bucktooth and the same off-center front teeth described in the forensic report. At this point, police were nearly certain that the victim was A Dieu. To be absolutely certain, investigators contacted A Dieu's cousin in Taiwan and asked her to reach out to A Dieu's mother and daughter in Vietnam. Saliva samples were collected from both of them and sent for DNA comparison with the victim. The final results confirmed it beyond all doubt. The victim was Le Thi Dieu Trang, commonly known as A Dieu, a woman who had crossed the sea from Vietnam to Taiwan to work. After confirming the victim's identity, the focus of the investigation immediately shifted to tracking down the murderer. The first person to be closely interrogated was Chu Wenguang, the man who claimed to be A Dieu's boyfriend and had voluntarily contacted the police. The reason was simple. A Dieu's cousin and family members in Vietnam all stated that they had never heard of this man. Furthermore, A Dieu was legally married and had a child in Vietnam. Therefore, this mysterious boyfriend naturally became the prime suspect in the case. During questioning, Chu Wenguang admitted truthfully that A Dieu did have a husband in Vietnam and that her husband was also in Taiwan at the time. He said he met A Dieu through work in 2013, and the two gradually became lovers. On March 23rd, the day A Dieu lost contact, the two of them were on a date in a park when they were suddenly caught in the act by A Dieu's husband. A fierce argument broke out among the three, and they separated on hostile terms. The last time Chu Wenguang spoke to A Dieu was that same evening. During the phone call, A Dieu's voice was trembling as she said she was having a violent fight with her husband and begged Chu to come pick her up. However, Chu was busy at work and couldn't leave. When he called back after getting off work, no one answered A Dieu's phone anymore. Police later summoned several key witnesses. Among them, A Dieu's mother, Nguyen Thi Lien, and her older brother, Le Minh Thanh, stated that A Dieu and her husband, Phung Minh Huai, had traveled to Taiwan for work. Although their relationship was not completely bad, they argued frequently. A Dieu often called home to complain, saying her husband was extremely jealous. On one occasion during a major conflict, he had even slapped her. A Dieu once said something to her mother that sent chills down her spine. "Sooner or later, I'm going to die in his hands." The last phone call Nguyen Thi Lien received from her daughter was at around 10 p.m. on March 23rd. A Dieu was crying on the phone, saying she desperately wanted to return to Vietnam and that she was afraid Minh Huai would kill her. At the time, Nguyen Thi Lien assumed it was just another ordinary marital argument, She comforted her daughter briefly and then hung up. The landlord of Adieu's boarding house also provided a crucial lead. At around noon on March 24th, he saw a strange man on Adieu's balcony, hurriedly packing up a large amount of luggage. Since he had never seen this man before, the landlord asked, "What are you doing?" The man replied in a foreign-sounding accent, helping someone pack. Although Adieu was nowhere in sight, the landlord did not press further. In hindsight, everything about it seemed suspicious. Not only did multiple witness testimonies point toward Min Huai, investigators also discovered that the foam factory where he worked was located in Rende District, Tainan. Even more disturbing, the company dormitory where he lived was separated by only one wall from the guava orchard where Adieu's skull was found. Although police had not yet obtained direct physical evidence against Min Huai, the situation did not allow for delay. News of the case quickly spread through the foreign labor community, and social media was flooded with posts about a so-called Vietnamese man who murdered and dismembered his wife. Some posts even included photos of Min Huai. Outside the police station, many Vietnamese workers gathered, pointing at the image on their phones and unanimously claiming that he was the killer. Police understood that if the suspect realized he had been identified and fled, capturing him would become far more difficult. On October 2nd, police assembled a task force along with prosecutors and raided Kun Ching Company Limited, where Min Huai worked, to carry out the arrest. When officers arrived at the dormitory, Min Huai appeared calm and showed no signs of panic. When police, through an interpreter, asked about his wife's whereabouts, his answers became evasive. At times he claimed he hadn't seen her for a long time and didn't know where she was. Other times he guessed she might still be in Taoyuan. Throughout the entire exchange, he never once mentioned that his wife may have been murdered. However, when police clearly informed him that Adieu had not only been killed but also dismembered and showed him photos of the severed arm and skull, Min Huai's face showed no fear, no shock, and no grief whatsoever. Although Min Huai adamantly denied all involvement, the mounting evidence and interlocking witness statements all pointed directly to him. That same day, the prosecutor issued an order for his detention and seized all personal belongings from his dorm room for further forensic investigation. The investigative team knew they were facing a long and difficult battle. Later, both the prosecutor and the lead detective would admit that interrogating a foreign suspect was extraordinarily challenging. Nearly all standard interrogation techniques were rendered ineffective. Once every question passed through an interpreter, the psychological pressure created by tone and facial expressions was greatly weakened. Whether police used a gentle approach or aggressive questioning, whenever Min Huai didn't want to answer, he would simply repeat a few basic phrases. "I don't know. I don't understand." Although Min Huai had lived and worked in Taiwan for some time and clearly possessed basic Mandarin communication skills, under these circumstances, the prosecutors could only repeatedly request extensions of his detention, hoping to break through his airtight silence before time ran out. Meanwhile, during the period of Min Huai's interrogation, the police and prosecutors did not remain idle. They carefully laid out every piece of physical evidence that had been collected, determined to find the crucial key that would finally crack the case. The first items that caught investigators' attention were the objects used to wrap the skull. Aside from the pillowcase that Chu Wenguang had already recognized, confirmed to be the same type used in Adieu's rental room, the black plastic bag on the outside, which appeared ordinary at first glance, turned out to conceal a crucial secret. Police carefully measured the bag and discovered that it measured 25 by 23 inches, a highly unusual size that could not be found anywhere on the Taiwanese retail market. Following this clue, investigators summoned Lin Yan Guang, the manager of Baodai Plastics, along with Zhang Huishu, a procurement employee at Kun Kang Company, where Min Huai worked. Both men confirmed that this specific type of plastic bag had been custom-made for the company, unavailable for public purchase, but easily accessible internally. They later provided police with bags of the same type. Through comparison, investigators discovered that not only did the dimensions match perfectly, but more importantly, each bag produced by different manufacturing machines leaves behind a unique surface pattern. When light was shined on the samples, The bag provided by the foam factory and the bag that had wrapped the skull showed identical patterns, leaving no doubt that this was far beyond a coincidence. Another critical clue was the rice sack that had been torn open by the dog, found beside the skull. The bag originally contained 3 kilograms of rice, equivalent to about 6.6 pounds. Police summoned Min Huai's roommates, including Wang Dekai and Nguyen the Toan, among others. They all confirmed that because this brand of rice was the cheapest, Min Huai frequently bought large bags and stored them in the dormitory. At the time, the storage area was still stacked with many empty rice sacks of the same kind. Police immediately inspected the storage room and confirmed that the rice sack found at the crime scene was an exact match to those kept in the dormitory. Time moved forward to November 5th, 2013, the 11th interrogation of Min Huai. This time, the atmosphere was completely different. All of the physical evidence, the custom-made black plastic bag, the matching 6.6-pound rice sack, and the key pillowcase, were laid out one by one in front of him, forming a silent but unbreakable chain of evidence. The prosecutor calmly and clearly explained all of the investigative findings. Just as the muscles around Min Huai's eyebrows and mouth began to twitch uncontrollably, the rhythm of the interrogation suddenly shifted. Captain Huang Jinquan abruptly raised his voice, cutting straight to the core. "All the evidence is right here, and you insist you never had any of Dieu's belongings, so then why did we find her cell phone in your room?" He pressed relentlessly, giving the suspect no chance to catch his breath. "Look at the call history yourself. Before March 23rd, all signal locations were in northern Taiwan. On the 24th and 25th, the signals appeared at your dormitory. The truth is right in front of you. How much longer are you going to lie?" This relentless series of blows left Min Huai frozen in his seat. The first crack finally formed in his psychological defense. His eyes drifted uncertainly, and at last he quietly muttered, "I don't need her anymore." Wang Jinquan immediately seized this fleeting opportunity. He shifted tactics, leaned forward, and asked gently, "You actually loved your wife very much, didn't you? After all, she's the mother of your child." The word child struck like a key, unlocking the deepest and most fragile corner of Min Huai's heart. Thinking of the young daughter he could not bear to part with back home, this seemingly cold and hardened man finally collapsed completely, bursting into sobs on the spot. He then confessed that Dieu's death was caused by his own hands. At this point, Min Huai finally began to slowly recount the full sequence of the crime. It turned out that Min Huai, who was 29 years old, and Dieu Trang, 28, had met and fallen in love back in their hometown in Vietnam. In 2007, after discovering that Dieu was pregnant, the two quickly got married and welcomed their daughter on June 5th of the same year. Although the birth of a new life was a joyful event, the financial pressure that followed was very real. Neither of them had a high level of education, and the jobs they could find in Vietnam paid too little to support a family. After marriage, their relationship often fluctuated because of money problems, with constant arguments. In 2011, after many discussions, the couple, like many others from their hometown, decided to go abroad to work, hoping to earn enough money to return to Vietnam and buy a house. They borrowed $13,500 from relatives to pay the brokerage fees, and then traveled to Taiwan separately for work on September 11th and November 24th. Their young daughter was left in the care of Dieu's mother in Vietnam, while the couple regularly sent money back for living expenses. They arrived in Taiwan carrying dreams of a better life, only to discover that reality was far harsher than expected. Foreign laborers were highly vulnerable to exploitation. Not only did they work longer and harder than local workers, but their pay was also disproportionately low, and on top of that, they were burdened with massive debt. Buying a house was out of the question. Just the monthly loan repayments alone nearly suffocated them. To survive and continue sending money home, they were forced to scrimp on food and daily necessities. Min Huai was assigned to work at a foam factory, where he adapted relatively well. Hardworking by nature, he quickly became familiar with the job and made friends with a group of fellow Vietnamese workers. Hearing his native language offered him some comfort. He told himself that as long as he was willing to endure hardship, he could still support his family. Adieu, however, was assigned to work in Hualien, and her experience was very different. The exhausting days in a food processing factory left her barely able to breathe. After struggling on for 6 months, she could no longer endure it. In June 2012, she ran away from Hualien without telling anyone, later moving to Taipei under a false identity to look for a new job. Although runaway migrant workers were classified as illegal labor and would be immediately deported if caught, many employers were still willing to secretly hire them because they could pay them lower wages. Under these circumstances, Adieu quickly found a job at Chime Yuan restaurant in Taipei in November 2012 and gradually settled into her new life. Although the couple lived apart, Min Huai still spent 2 to 3 precious days off each month traveling north to see his wife. He turned down invitations from co-workers and friends, enduring 6 to 7 hours of round-trip travel just to spend a few brief hours with her. At that time, their relationship was still sweet. Once during an outing, Adieu jokingly said, "If you ever cheat on me, I'll drown you." Min Huai laughed and replied, "And if you ever cheat on me, I'll chop you into 3 pieces." Such extreme vows reflected how firmly committed they both believed they were to each other at the time. However, as the long separation continued, Adieu gradually lost the shared faith and struggle and the future the couple had once envisioned together. Her work in Taipei became more stable, her Mandarin improved rapidly, and she was soon able to chat comfortably with her co-workers at the restaurant. Whether due to necessary work interactions or the loneliness of being far from home, Adieu and the restaurant's chef, Chu Wenguang, grew increasingly close and eventually developed a romantic relationship. Adieu believed she could keep it hidden, but Min Huai, constantly worried about his wife, quickly noticed the changes in her behavior. In January 2013, he discovered that she owned 2 cell phones. After questioning her, he learned that one had been given to her by another man. Enraged, he slapped Adieu, then secretly contacted the telecom company to obtain her call records. Through this, he acquired Chu Wenguang's phone number and confirmed that his wife was indeed having an affair. Even so, he chose to give Adieu a chance to turn back. She also promised that she would cut off all contact with Chu Wenguang, but Min Huai could no longer trust her as he once had. He repeatedly called Chu Wenguang to interrogate him, demanding to know whether he was still in contact with Adieu and whether they had a physical relationship. Despite her promise, Adieu quickly relapsed. She continued maintaining a love triangle with both Chu Wenguang and Min Huai. By mid-March 2013, she had even moved into a small apartment that Chu Wenguang rented for her in Tamsui. The two began living together intermittently. Time moved forward to March 24, 2013, a day off for Min Huai. Early that morning, he rode his bicycle to the Tainan bus terminal to travel north and visit his wife. That same day, Adieu told Chu Wenguang that she was going to the market to buy groceries and cook a meal for her husband, Min Huai. Confused, Chu asked her, "You're always saying your husband beats you and he also knows you're seeing someone else, so why are you still bringing him to the apartment I rented for you?" Adieu avoided answering directly and brushed it off vaguely. By noon, Min Huai arrived in Taipei and walked to Chime Yuan restaurant, where Adieu worked. Along the way, he unexpectedly saw Adieu and Chu Wenguang being affectionate in the park next to the restaurant. Witnessing this with his own eyes, he completely lost control of his anger and rushed over to confront Chu, demanding to know why he was involved with a married woman. Chu defended himself, insisting that he had never known Adieu was married. As the confrontation grew more intense, Adieu hurriedly told Min Huai that she needed to return to work and asked him to go walk around elsewhere first. After they separated, she called Min Huai and said, "I've quit my job here. I won't come back anymore, and you shouldn't come looking for me again." She then hung up. Both furious and heartbroken, Min Huai demanded that Adieu explain everything to him face to face. That evening, after she got off work, the two agreed to meet at Songlian MRT station nearby. After work, Adieu arrived at the station as planned. As soon as they met, she told Min Huai that she had broken up with Chu Wenguang and returned the phone he had given her. The two then took the train into Tamsui and went back to Adieu's small apartment to discuss their future. But by this point, Min Hoi no longer trusted anything she said, and the discussion quickly turned into a heated argument. Feeling that normal conversation was no longer possible, at around 8 p.m., Adieu made 2 phone calls to Chu Wenguang, asking if he could come to her apartment to pick her up. But Chu was busy at the restaurant and unable to leave. Adieu did not push the matter further, yet she also did not leave the apartment. Then, at 10:05 p.m., Adieu called her mother and said she desperately wanted to return to Vietnam, and if she didn't, she feared Min Hoi would kill her. After her mother comforted her with a few brief words, Adieu hung up and returned to the room, where she lay down on the bed with Min Hoi. At this point, despite having just claimed she had broken up with Chu, Adieu suddenly changed her stance. She demanded a divorce and firmly declared that she would never give up custody of their daughter. She even mocked Min Hoi, saying he earned very little money and was irresponsible, struggling just to support himself, let alone capable of raising a child. After saying this, she turned to leave the room. Severely provoked by her words, Min Hoi instantly lost all emotional control. To stop Adieu from leaving, he dragged her back onto the bed and used his right hand to strangle her, then rolled his body over hers, forcing her face down into the pillow. He whispered into her ear, "You cheated. You don't deserve to be loved, and you certainly don't deserve to be our child's mother." Adieu struggled violently beneath him, then gradually went still. Min Hoi stood up and went out onto the balcony to smoke. When he returned to the room, he realized that his wife was no longer breathing. Min Hoi later confessed that he slept next to his wife's body that entire night, waking up at around 6 a.m. the next morning, March 24th. He recalled dreaming that Adieu asked to be taken back to Tainan with him. As he looked at her cold body, he remembered the words he had once said, "If you ever cheat on me, I'll chop you into 3 pieces." At that moment, the sentence became an inescapable command in his mind. He found a fruit knife and a small knife in the apartment, dragged Adieu's body into the bathroom, covered her face with a pillowcase, and began to carry out his plan. However, both knives were too dull, and he failed. At around 9 a.m., Min Hoi went out to a nearby market and bought a large cleaver, then returned to continue dismembering the body. After dismembering her, he wrapped Adieu's skull in a pillowcase and stuffed it, along with both arms and the blood-stained clothing, into her suitcase. The upper torso, now without arms, was dressed in a small camisole, wrapped in multiple layers of pillowcases and plastic bags, and placed into a crossbody bag. The lower body was put into a black plastic bag and then placed inside a cloth bag. After handling the remains, Min Hoi thoroughly cleaned the apartment, then gathered all the blood-stained paper towels and the 3 murder weapons, divided them into 2 bundles, and discarded them into nearby bushes and roadside trash bins. By noon, after confirming everything had been cleaned up, he carried the 3 large bags containing the body parts down to the first floor, preparing to call a taxi and leave. At that very moment, he was seen by Adieu's landlord. Min Hoi waved down a taxi while carrying the 3 large pieces of luggage. Police later questioned the taxi driver, Chen Xian Hui, who confirmed that he had indeed driven Min Hoi to Tainan. Chen recalled that this passenger left a deep impression. At first, Min Hoi said he wanted to go to Taipei Main Station, then suddenly changed his mind and said he wanted to go to Tainan instead. The driver quoted a fare of 5,000 new Taiwan dollars, and Min Hoi agreed without hesitation, a sharp contrast to most Vietnamese laborers, who were usually extremely frugal and only took short rides. The large amount of luggage he carried also made a strong impression on the driver. After traveling nearly 186 miles, Min Hoi got out at the bus terminal where his bicycle was parked. He temporarily left all the luggage there and then used his bike to dump the body parts in separate stages. First, he threw the crossbody bag containing the upper torso into a large drainage canal under bridge number 1 in Rende District. Next, he rode toward Kun Kang Company, where the skull was later discovered, removed the black plastic bag containing the lower body from the cloth bag, and threw it into the bushes. The cloth bag itself was discarded on the roadside several hundred feet away. Finally, he placed the suitcase containing the skull and arms inside the abandoned grounds of Yan Yiyuan factory. Only then did he return to his company dormitory to rest, calmly preparing for the next day's work as if nothing had happened. On March 25th, Min Huai went to work as usual. None of his co-workers noticed anything suspicious. It wasn't until 9 p.m., after his shift ended, that he took a rice sack, black plastic bags, and kerosene from the dormitory and returned to the abandoned factory where he had left the suitcase the day before. He wrapped Adieu's skull in multiple layers of plastic and the rice sack, then poured kerosene over it and set fire to the suitcase along with Adieu's clothes. After finishing everything, he carried the carefully wrapped skull back to the dormitory. Under the cover of night, he climbed over the fence behind the dorm, slipped into the adjacent guava orchard, and threw the skull deep into the overgrown bushes. Then he quietly returned to the dormitory, as if he had simply completed an ordinary task, and lay down to rest. By this point, he had personally finished disposing of all the physical evidence of the crime, and then calmly continued going to work and living his daily life as if nothing had happened. Even the most seasoned investigators were left deeply shaken by this. Min Huai later recounted the events through tears, but the prosecutors did not fully accept his explanation. Although he portrayed himself as deeply devoted, going so far as to claim that Adieu had appeared to him in a dream, his actions told a different story. A man who had said, "I don't need her anymore," and who truly still loved his wife, would not have chosen to dismember her as a way to bring her back to Tainan. Even after bringing her back, he did not give her a proper resting place. Instead, he discarded her remains in random patches of bushes. Police also suspected that Min Huai had deliberately thrown Adieu's upper body into a drainage canal, hoping the surge of water from the recent typhoon would wash away critical evidence. In Vietnamese folklore, there is also a belief that if a body is not kept whole, it can prevent a restless spirit from returning to seek vengeance. All of this made it impossible to justify Min Huai's brutal dismemberment as an act motivated by love. Later, when Min Huai learned that police had only recovered the lower half of Adieu's body and that the upper torso had been swept away by floodwaters and never found, he broke down in tears again, begging officers to somehow allow Adieu's body to be made whole. But some mistakes cannot be undone, no matter how desperately one wishes they could be. In December 2014, Min Huai was sentenced to 18 years in prison for murder and improper disposal of a body. After serving his sentence, he will be deported back to Vietnam. Later, the prosecutor recalled that after the verdict was finalized, he once asked Min Huai what plans he had for his future after prison. Min Huai answered softly, "My wife is gone. I don't even know if my daughter will still remember me. Everything is different now. I'll think about the future later." Perhaps from the moment the third person entered their marriage, Min Huai's life was set on an irreversible path. If Adieu had never met Chu Wenguang, perhaps the two of them might still have had what once seemed like a hopeful future. And if Chu Wenguang had never made that fateful phone call to the police, perhaps investigators would never have been able to identify Min Huai as the killer. But in life, everything seems to be guided by fate. No one ever expected that a bitter vow once spoken in anger, "If you cheat on me, I'll chop you into 3 pieces," would one day become a terrifying reality. During those months, knowing that his wife's skull lay discarded in the bushes just one wall away, yet still going calmly to work every single day, I truly can't help but wonder. What was Min Huai thinking in his heart during those long, silent nights? Both of them left Vietnam chasing the same dream of a better life. But distance, pressure, and loneliness in a foreign land slowly eroded everything. In the end, no one won. Adieu lost her life. Min Huai lost his freedom, and their young daughter back home lost both her mother and her father. What do you think? In this tragedy, who do you believe bears the greatest responsibility? Share your thoughts in the comments below.